ethics in business. It's, a topic that I wish we didn't have to talk about. Right? I wish the world would just work in a way that everyone did the right thing all the time. But we live in a world where people want to take shortcuts. People want to get rich fast. People are willing to cut people in line just to get ahead. We see this behavior, and it's not everybody. I understand that, but there's enough. So let's start with the definition here. Ethics, the standards of moral behavior that is behavioral accepted by society as right versus wrong. So it has to do with the society, in that what might be ethical in the United States might not be ethical in Japan, or what's ethical in Japan might not be ethical in the United States, right? So there's a certain different societies, different places have different rights and wrongs, right? So that's why ethics is such a hard thing to define, as well as somebody to say, what's right versus what is wrong. There's some gray areas there. But then there's some examples that we're going to get into that are just, very obvious, like right versus wrong. I'll start off with one as a student, right? Plagiarizing, taking somebody else's work and saying it's your own is unethical. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Like you can't do that. Like it's stealing. It's just stealing, and stealing is not okay. With a customer interaction, with a customer, if a customer gets their order wrong, and they tip you, but you're not allowed to take tips, should you take that? There's like the little things that happen in the work world of, is it ethical for me to do this or not? My one advice to most people is, if you even have to ask yourself, is this ethical? Or if you have a bad feeling about something, more than likely it's unethical, right? So if you're even asking your question, like, is this ethical? You're really, along that line. So keep that in mind as kind of a guiding light as we go through this. So in our society, what's right? Honesty, courage, self-sacrifice, self-control, respect for human. So self-control, right? Like, you might be very angry at somebody, but should you lash out at them? Probably not. And then integrity, right? Doing what you say you're going to do. Just think about trust. Like, why do you trust people? You trust people because they're reliable, they're credible, they're empathetic. Who do you not trust? People who act in their own self-interest all the time. So what's wrong? We went over cheating, being a coward. The coward one is interesting. I like to interpret it with the fact that, you shouldn't, if something goes, like we call them whistleblowers now, if something is going bad in your organization, and so a lot of people are like, well, everyone knows about it and nobody's doing anything about it, so I guess it's fine, right? That's what I interpret cowardice as. Where to be brave would be the one to say, like, no, this isn't right. We shouldn't be doing this, right? That would be the right ethical decision in that moment. And so we need more of that if we want to build a great future, right? Cruelty. Both to animals and to people, right? We don't want to be mean or cruel to people. Pretty obvious one, but you'd be surprised what goes on in the business world. So VW has a famous lawsuit for lying about their emissions on their vehicles. Such a scandal like that one, it had large effects. The thing that we're not talking about is how many companies do things like this and don't get caught, or they do things like this and they're okay with the fine because the fine is still less than doing the right thing. That's where, that's why we're talking about this now, is because there will be decisions in your life, and people, when they look at option A versus option B is probably unethical, but it costs less money. Option A costs a little bit more, but it's the ethical decision. How do we get people to go for option A when in the long term it is the right choice? But some people are just thinking about that short-term gain and not thinking about the outcome or the effects of their decisions and how many other people it's going to affect. Remember, in chapter 1, we learned about stakeholders, right? Companies reach out and touch hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, both the surrounding area and at large throughout the world, through their emissions and through their decisions they're making. It really does. It's like a ripple effect, right? One decision can have a ripple out to everyone else. It can go out and get them too. So keep that in mind. It's not just a few people that could be being affected. It's millions. So we talked about this. As a student, you don't plagiarize. But when do you know? What are some questions to ask yourself? Is my proposed action legal? Right. So first, is it even legal? Right. Is there a law against what I'm about to do? Because if there is, then it's just unlawful. It's unethical. Is it balanced? Right. Is there going to be any major disadvantages? Right. Is it balanced as far as it definitely has some advantages as well? And then number 3, how will it make me feel about myself? Are you going to be proud to make this decision? Do you feel good about your decision? So ask yourself that question. And that's why I say if you're really on the fence, that's usually a bad side. In business, a really common thing we talk about, it's actually not that common, is insider trading. That's when somebody gets a piece of information that's not available to anybody else and uses that information to then make money through the stock market usually, right? So they get information that nobody else has, and they use it in their advantage to get rich. You might be wondering, well, who cares? Like, they're just making money. They're not hurting anybody, but they are hurting somebody. They're hurting somebody that could have been on the other side of that trade or could have bought those same shares. There's always someone else on the other side of these decisions. You just have to think about it and follow them. There's never a decision that doesn't affect anyone. There's usually going to be some stakeholders. Here's some common, Martha Stewart being one, right? She received information from New Cancer, was not approved, so she sold a bunch of stock before the morning that that was going to be announced. So it prevented her from losing a bunch of money. So many scandals. Enron is a big one, and Enron cost us all kinds of money. Both from an investor as well as as other businesses around the world. We now have to do the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So there's a lot of things with that. Ripple effect with that. Now, code of ethics. Many companies now have a code of ethics. I think it's not just important to write this out like Hershey's did here, but it's also important to walk the walk. Everyone is looking at the leadership. They're looking at the owners of a company to look for guidance of what is right and what is wrong. There's usually a company culture, and is that culture ethical or is that culture unethical? I think people look into that. It's like when you have a kid, your kid will look at you. If some of you might not have kids yet, but being a parent, you realize that everything you say or do, your parents are watching you, your kids are watching you, and they're absorbing everything you do. So if you do something they think is right, if you do something, if you say no to bad ethical, then they can know the difference between what is right and what is wrong. And it's the same thing in a company. The company owners are the parents, and then the employees are the kids, right? And so they're always watching. And then lastly, a very popular acronym is CSR, is corporate social responsibility, and that's businesses going above and beyond just good ethics and making good ethical decisions, but actually actively trying to make the world a better place through maybe fair trade or organic, less emissions, paying people a living wage, using sustainability. There's lots of going with clean energy. There's lots of ways that companies can do this, and you're seeing more and more do it, helping out local communities and neighborhoods, donations, things like that. Beyond ethics is actually actively participating in social responsibility and societal marketing, and adding to your philanthropy, your giving back to the world.